actually. We'll make it freely distributed to all. Yes. All right. Where are we? Lilia. 192. Very good. Where are we? First paragraph. Yes. First paragraph. First new paragraph or what? Really?
Through a revolution.
Sorry?
Third line down. Fourth line down.
First new paragraph? Ah, yes, the top of the page, you mean? Ah, yes. The very top of the page, okay. All right, let me read to you. This appropriation is further done by the manner in which it must be effected. It can only be effected through a union, which by the character of the proletariat itself can only be a universal one, and through a revolution in which, on the one hand, the earlier power of the earlier mode of production and intercourse and social organization is overthrown, that's the capitalist mode of production, and on the other hand, there develops the universal character and energy of the proletariat without which the revolution cannot be accomplished, and in which further the proletariat rids itself of everything that still clings to it from previous position in society. So, all right. So Marx is actually clearer, even on page 193. If you read, actually, it's a wonderful 4 points. The first point on bottom of 192, he's basically saying there must be a conflict between the forces and relations of production, and we'll get into that later. And then the second is he talks about the state, and we'll get into that later too. But the third point, he says, now this is very interesting. In all revolutions up to now, and there have been revolutions, the bourgeois revolution, there's one example, in all revolutions up to now, the mode of activity always remained unscathed, and it was only a question of a different distribution of this activity, a new distribution of labour to other persons, whilst a communist revolution is directed against the preceding mode of activity, does away with all labour, and abolishes the rule of classes, with classes themselves, because it is carried through by the class which no longer counts as a class in society, is not recognised as a class, and is in itself the expression of the dissolution of all classes, nationalities, etc. within present society. Now, that is difficult. What is he saying here? That we've had revolutions before. We've had a bourgeois revolution. What happened in the bourgeois revolution? Anybody know what happened in the French Revolution according to the orthodox view? What happens? What was the rising class, Simeon? The bourgeois revolution?
Rising class?
Yes, what was the revolutionary class?
The mercantile class.
The mercantile class, the bourgeois class, the capitalist class, the owners of the means of production, the owners of factories. They are and who is the declining class? The aristocracy, the landed aristocracy. This is a conflict between two dominant groups. What is peculiar about the revolution from capitalism to communism? Who will make that revolution? The proletariat, the exploited class. For the first time in history, the exploited class itself will make the revolution. And that exploited class, the working class, of which we will learn more next week, the exploited class is the majority of society. And it will not just substitute one form of exploitation for another, but will eliminate exploitation altogether. That is what we, of course, mean by communism. But it has to be a revolution because, of course, some people will resist. Right? Greg? Who will resist?
The revolution?
Yes, who will resist the working class insurgent impulses? Who will resist? Who doesn't like the idea of the working class being revolutionary? The bourgeois. Why don't they like it?
Because they don't want to relinquish the power.
They don't want to relinquish their access to the means of production. And why do they not want to relinquish access to an ownership of the means of production? Why not?
That's how they make their living.
That's how they make their very splendid living. Yes. So, it's Marx and Engels saying it will not happen slowly, evolutionarily. It will not happen gradually. It will have to be a revolution. It will have to be perhaps even possibly, he doesn't say it, but it could be sort of a coercive revolution of force will be applied. But definitely it has to be a major upheaval of society if the capitalist class is to be defeated. But they say something even more interesting in the last point, number 4. And the end of that section, 5 lines from the end of the section. Siana. You ready? 5 lines from the bottom. 5 lines from the bottom of, or 5 lines above the section entitled C.
Okay.
This.
Wait,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It says this revolution is necessary.
This revolution.
Page 193. C, section C.
Right.
So you're going to go 5 lines up.
This revolution is necessary. Therefore,
No. It's too important for you to do it quickly. Big, loud and slow and clear.
this revolution is necessary, therefore, not only because the ruling class cannot be overthrown in any other way, but also because now, listen.
The class overthrowing it can only, in a revolution, succeed and rid itself of all the necessities in it to balance society.
Only in a revolution can the working class rid itself of the muck of ages and thus be in a position to found a new society. What is the muck? The muck of ages. Siana, the muck of ages.
The capitalist mentality, the classist mentality of various
The capitalist mentality. What is that capitalist mentality that has seeped into all of us?
the individual division of labor?
The individual division of labor, yes. Anything else? What else has seeped into us?
The benches of the consumer?
Very good. What else has seeped into us? Yes. No, you're absolutely right. I'm trying to get you all to perform here. Yeah, what else has seeped in? I'm trying to get you conscious of how you have been shaped by the world around you. What else? What is this individual division of labor? I can't hear you. Yes, hands up. Jessica. Sonny, the natural division of labor, yes. But what is it? Imagine from the standpoint of communism, what are the things that, what you spontaneously will say will be wow, this is impossible. This communism is impossible. Why is it impossible? Why would most of you say it was impossible? Why would we all say it was impossible? Yeah, but what ideology? What ideology? What ideology? Yes. Yes. Private property, but not only private, in what sense private property? Ownership of what? Labor, but ownership, we all want to obsess. Yeah, Ian. Is this Ian, right? Ian.
Our world really revolve around money and currency?
Money and currency, yes, that may be. But I think, what are we? We are constituted as what, Hannah? Yes, but very few of us own the means of production. So what happens to the mass of it? All of us, the people, the great masses of the people? What is Marx getting at when he says we have to get rid of the muck of ages? Yes, Matthew.
He's talking about being subjects of other people. He's talking about getting rid of the hierarchical system,
the hierarchical system, but I'm thinking of all our mentality. What mentality? Muck of ages that have been seeped into our mind, Miriam. Well, but why can't we cooperate? Our interests conflict with each other, but what do we think? Yes, Mary? Means of individualism. What is it? It's this possessive individualism we have. We all see the world. You know what do we do in this class? We all stick up our hands individually, but more than that, what do? We all go home and read our tuckers individually, but then what do? We write papers individually. And why do we write papers? Because we want to grade. We are obsessed with this possessive individualism. It pervades our entire existence. You cannot build communism on such a possessive individualism. That will be dissolved, Marx and Engels say. The Smithian outlook on society, that there are only individuals in society, that will be dissolved in a collective struggle. And I don't know how many here have ever been involved in a collective struggle, but collective struggles do indeed give a sense of how we collaborate, cooperate, what we share, rather than how we compete with one another. Yes, Felipe, what does that mean?
I used to work for, I used to be an organizer, and, we used to basically, I used to organize facilities to basically have a union contract, and then, we train people to basically negotiate for a union contract, and they have to do that collectively and come up with the ideas of what they wanted.
And were they able to do it?
Yes, they were.
Yes, they were. So, given the facilities, that's not even a revolution, that's Felipe organizing the people. Just think if there were a million Felipes around the world organizing a revolution, we would have a whole different sense of who we are. So this individualism that besets our lives, which Smith, of course, in a sense, represents in his formulation, Marx and Engels is going to argue that it dissolves in a collective struggle, that we have a sense of our joinedness to others by participating in collective struggle. Yes, okay, so revolution is necessary to overthrow the capitalist class, the ruling class. It's also necessary to dissolve those ideas that the idea that human beings are, Katie, you said it once, greedy, selfish. That's what we presume. Everybody says to me, or to Marx and Engels, what do they say? It's not possible because human beings are selfish. Marx and Engels says that is the muck of ages. That selfishness is a product of history, a product of society in which we have lived. Through struggle, that selfishness will be dissolved. And the only way I could ever convince you that is for you to participate in a collective struggle. And you will have to have a different sense of self and a relationship to others. Yes. Okay, that's why revolution is necessary. The muck of ages. Right, now. But what sort of revolution? What sort of revolution has this got to be? What's the scope of the revolution, Annie? Global, right? So this is a weird thing, it can't just happen in one country. He's very clear about that on page 163 or so. 162. He says, the top of 162, he says, I don't know, four lines, 5 lines, 1, 2, 3, 5 lines from the top of the page, Marx and Engels say, without this, that is without a world historical revolution, 1, communism could only exist as a local event. Alright? 2, the forces of intercourse themselves could not have developed as a universal. They have to be fully developed in order for there to be the reduction of the length of the working day. So you need a universal development developed as universal, hence intolerable power. They would have remained homebred conditions surrounded by superstition. And 3, each extension of intercourse would abolish local communism. If it's just communism in one society, then it will be surrounded by a capitalist society that will swamp it, nullify it, destroy it. And indeed, that of course is the problem. The many revolutions of a socialist, communist character have taken place in one society and have not managed to survive because they are surrounded by a capitalist world hostile to that. So Marx understands that in some way this has got to be a world revolution. I suppose the only way to imagine is like a domino effect. The revolution will occur in one country that will lead to a revolution in the next, to the next, to the next, until the whole world becomes communist. Yes, but again, it's not very clear. Not very clear at all. Not very clear at all. But that's very important, that he recognizes communism in one country is not possible. Yes. All right. So what we said, the revolution is necessary to overthrow the ruling class. It's necessary for the working class to rid itself of the muck of ages, the legacy of the past. We've also said now that revolution ultimately has to be of a world historical character. What are the preconditions of this revolution? What must also have to be the case, not just world, but what are the preconditions? Well, one precondition is what I just spelled out. There has to be universal what? Jessica? Degradation. I mean, essentially, the vast majority of people in society must be without property, must be propertyless. That's not to say they don't have any shirts. They may even have houses, though that's becoming more and more difficult. But they don't have access to the means of their subsistence. They have to do what? They have to become wage laborers. So basically, the one condition for this revolution is that the vast majority of people are indeed propertyless. Yes. But second, what is important for this revolution to take place, for it to lead to communism? What is also important according to Marx and Engels? And he says this, they say this quite a number of places in this text. What else is necessary if this revolution is going to succeed in delivering communism? Not only has it got to be worldwide, not only by the working class, not only a working class that is enormous, but also, what else has to be the case? Simeon.
The means of production have to be sufficiently developed to be able to produce for everybody, otherwise want is generalized.
Yes, where are you quoting? Basically, Marx and Engels say that you have to have, Simeon's finding the page, Marx and Engels are saying that you have to have the forces of production, our capacity to transform nature. The technology has got to be sufficiently developed so that when the communism comes, we can reduce the length of the working day. We need advanced technology. Yes, page.
161.
161.
7 lines up from the bottom.
Right. Well, in fact, one could actually read... why didn't you read starting the third line into that paragraph?
Third line. You mean starting with 4?
Yes.
For it to become an intolerable power, i.e. a power against which men make a revolution, it must necessarily have rendered the great mass of humanity propertyless and produced at the same time the contradiction of an existing world of wealth and culture, both of which conditions presuppose a great increase in productive power, a high degree of its development.
Go on.
And on the other hand, this development of productive forces, which itself implies the actual empirical existence of men in the world historical and local being, is an absolutely necessary practical premise because without it, want is merely made general. And with destitution of the struggle for necessities and all the old filthy business would necessarily be reproduced. And furthermore, because only with this universal development of productive forces is a universal...
Right. Go on. Well, that's enough. You made the point. The point is this. There's a beautiful passage at the end of the page. If the forces of production are not sufficiently developed when there is a revolution, that means that there will still, after the revolution, be a struggle for necessity. And the struggle for necessity will generate a whole new system of classes. There has to be a regime of plenitude. So the forces of production have got to be sufficient in order to reduce the length of the working day and produce all that we need. We need advanced technology for this revolution to take place and be effective. That is a very, 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 very crucial point. And of course, as before, we're going to have to need a world historical revolution. We'll need a world market. We need capitalism to be all over the world for this to be successful. Look, and now when you read this carefully, as you have just done, together with me in this collaborative, collective venture in the realm of freedom, now that you are here, you realize what? That it's damn difficult to have a communist revolution. You realize also that attempts, like, for example, the Soviet Union in 1917, what would happen to a revolution what do you imagine? In Russia, in 1917, a revolution takes place. It is a working class revolution. The working class seizes power. What happens? What happens? Imagine what happens. Russia, 1917. What sort of society do you imagine it would be? Come on. Yes. Very good. A lot of peasants. What? 90% peasant society. 10% workers. Workers make the revolution, but it's overwhelmingly an agrarian society. Wherefore the forces of production are underdeveloped. What's your name? Sam. Okay. And Isaac. Yes, my two new boys of the day. Very good. Okay, Sam and Isaac. Yes. The revolution of 1917 in Russia, the famous socialist revolution, the Bolshevik revolution, took place in a society which was overwhelmingly peasant, in which the forces of production were underdeveloped. And therefore, in that society, it would be impossible to construct communism. So what did Lenin and Trotsky and Bukharin, the revolution, what did they hope? What did they pray every day? What did their science tell them? Sam?
They hoped there'd be revolution in Western Europe.
Brilliant! You were going to make a great revolutionary theorist. Yes, right, they hoped. But it was more than a hope. They had a whole theory of why Russia's revolution would trigger the revolution in the West, in Europe, and specifically in Germany. So the hope was that this would trigger it, but of course it didn't. It triggered a reaction.